What's up, guys? This is Dylan with Sledge Accounting. I'm going to talk a little bit about S-Corps today and how it could potentially save you thousands of dollars come tax time. Like I said, I'm with Sledge Accounting. That's my outsourced accounting firm. Check us out. There's the website and my email right there, along with my Twitter. If you have any questions, hit me up. Would love to connect with you guys. Our firm, we're all in one year-round accounting, tax, and advisory service to make sure you pay the least amount of tax and make the most amount of cash. We're really your one-stop shop. We take care of everything, and we're there for you year-round instead of just at year-end like a lot of those other tax firms. Anyways, let's get right into it, talking about S-Corps. So what is an S-Corp? An S-Corp is a small business corporation. It's an election that you make that changes how you're treated for tax purposes, and it's a pass-through entity. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But like as far as an LLC goes, a lot of people will make an LLC, but that doesn't really affect a whole ton how you're taxed. Like if you're a single member LLC, you're still taxed like a sole proprietor. If maybe there's two of you that make an LLC, you guys are taxed like a partnership. LLC more is on the legal end of things. So when you're an LLC, you make an election to become an S-Corp, and that changes how you're taxed. And here's a little information on that election. You fill out the form 2553, and that's the S election. To make the election, all the shareholders have to consent. So if there's more than one of you guys, everyone has to agree that you want to make that election. You can't have more than 100 shareholders, and it has to be a domestic corporation here in the U.S. And there is a deadline, March 15th. So what are some of the advantages of having an S-Corp? So like I said earlier, it's a pass-through entity. And what this means is that the S-Corp itself, the business itself, doesn't pay any tax in most cases. There's a couple rare things that could make it happen. But in general, most of the time, it doesn't really happen a whole lot. And it being passed through, all of the income and expenses that the business generates, it flows to the shareholders, and you pay that tax on an individual level. This comes through on the Form K-1. You probably don't need to know that. Your accountant will know that, but just do it in there for fun. Another advantage, so it being a pass-through entity, like I said, all the gains and losses are passed through to the shareholders. So that means that if you take a loss, that loss can offset some of your other income if you had income coming in from other places. So say you have this business running an S-Corp, then maybe you have a W-2 job that made you some income. If you had a loss from your S-Corp, it'll offset some of that income that you had from your W-2 job. You are only allowed to deduct up to the amount of your basis in the company. Basis is essentially your investment. So right here, if you invested $20,000 into the business, but that S-Corp took a $30,000 loss, you can only offset other income up to $20,000 in that example. Now, the big reason that people move to an S-Corp, the big main advantage, is it helps mitigate self-employment taxes. So just to explain a little bit, when you're an employee, you're W-2'd working whatever job, your employer matches half of your Social Security and Medicare taxes. That's also called a self-employment tax. So you would pay 7.65% and your employer pays that other 7.65%. Well, when you become self-employed, when you're a business owner, you're now responsible for paying that other half, or that entire 15.3%. When you're an S-Corp, you pay yourself in two ways. You take a salary and a distribution. So when you're an LLC or a sole proprietor or a partnership, you're responsible for that entire 15%. When you're an S-Corp, you pay yourself two ways, a salary and a distribution. The salary portion is subject to 15%, but not the distribution. When you're just an LLC or a sole proprietor, the entire amount of your pay is subject to that 15%. So here's a little example, right? So this is if you're an LLC or sole proprietor, you're not an S-Corp at this point. Say you made $150,000 in net profits. Well, you owe 15.3% of self-employment, or in other words, the Social Security and Medicare tax, which would come out in this case to $22,000, almost $23,000. And that's not even including federal income tax and state income tax if that applies to your state. So now let's say that you did make that S election and you are an S-Corp now. You still made that $150,000, except this time you're going to take $75,000 of it in the form of a salary and that other $75,000 of it in the form of a distribution. So in this case, only that $75,000 of income that you took from the salary is subject to that 15.3%. So 15.3% of 75,000 comes out to 11,400, which in this scenario saves you $11,400. And that's every single year. Your income's probably going to vary year to year, but that's thousands of dollars of savings every single year, and that is the big appeal of the S-Corp. I mean, what would an extra $11,000 do for you and your business at the end of the year? There's a lot you can do with that amount of money. Now, the salary that you take needs to be considered reasonable compensation. It's kind of a bit of a gray area, but really just don't make it extremely high or extremely low. You should be fine. If you cut it right in half, that's pretty safe. Just think about what someone in a different business would make given your experience and your job title and what you're actually doing in that role. So when is the right time to become an S-Corp? Really, you should start having the conversation with your accountant, whoever that is, when you start profiting more than $50K. There could be some other factors that go into it, but that's where you should at least go to your accountant, come to me, go to whoever, and say, hey, given my situation, this is how much I'm making, this is what's going on, does it make sense for me to make an S-Corp? And they'll tell you. In short, without getting into the details, the reason why, if you're profiting less than $50K, why you shouldn't, is because you do get 20% qualified business income deduction, and you'll essentially save more just leaving it how it is if you're making less than that. And it's not worth some of the compliance burdens if you're making less than that. So some of the disadvantages, like I mentioned, there is some administrative requirements that can be tedious and time consuming. Like I said, you do pay yourself a salary, so that means you do have what comes with that, keeping track of your payroll expenses and whatnot. And also going along with the reasonable compensation, oftentimes in regards to getting a loan or your retirement and whatnot, they take into consideration your salary amount more so than that distribution amount. So if you make it way too low, you might have a hard time qualifying for a loan that you need or whatnot. Just something to kind of keep in mind. And that's why a lot of experts will suggest that savings that you get from being an S-Corp, those tax savings, that you should definitely put some of that towards your retirement or invest it back in the business. And that reasonable salary, you're supposed to take that whether you're actually making money from the business or not. And there is some other administrative stuff, like tracking meeting minutes and board of directors and stuff like that. Stuff to ask about when you talk with your accountant or CPA, whoever it is. Another thing to mention, like I said, you're paid in two ways. You take that salary and you take a distribution. So that distribution, that other $75,000 in this example, that is taxed at capital gains rate, which is oftentimes, it's less than your ordinary income rate. So that's another advantage too. So yeah, overall, depending on your business, depending how much you're making, you definitely could save thousands of dollars from making that S election. If you're making over $50,000, definitely have that conversation with someone, whether that's an accountant you already have, whether that's with me. I'd love to talk with you, but it's definitely something to consider. If you got some value from this, definitely drop a like, drop a subscribe, and like I said previously, if you'd like to book a call, my calendar is on that website, sledgeaccounting.com. Hit me up on Twitter, happy to connect. And other than that, like I said, hope you got some value and freaking go make a ton of money and don't pay a lot of tax.